On a chilly autumn evening in downtown Chicago, just as the sun dipped low and the street lamps flickered awake, a young girl with tired eyes and trembling hands stood on the sidewalk like a shadow desperate to be noticed. Cars rolled by, people rushed past, conversations filled the air, yet none of it belonged to her. She felt invisible, as though life had pressed mute on her existence. And when she finally whispered the words she had held inside for years, "No one ever talks to me," she never imagined that the man sitting at the small café table, a stranger sipping coffee while watching the world go by, would be the one to change everything. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach more hearts. Her name was Mara, a 19-year-old who had already tasted more loneliness than most people face in a lifetime. Her childhood had been a blur of foster homes, unstable guardians, broken promises, and nights spent wondering why the world kept passing her by. She had learned to walk quietly, to shrink herself so she wouldn't be a burden, to pretend she didn't need care when deep down she desperately longed for someone, anyone, to see her. And on that cold evening, she had nowhere to go, no one waiting for her, and nothing left but the hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would hear her if she dared to speak. Across the cafe's small metal table sat Ryan, a single dad in his early 30s, nursing a black coffee as he waited for his 8-year-old son, Jacob, to finish his after-school tutoring session. Ryan had the look of a man who carried exhaustion in his shoulders, balancing work, parenting, bills, and the loneliness that crept in after his wife passed away 3 years earlier. His life, too, was a quiet fight against grief, though he hid it behind strength for his son. But what struck him most in that moment wasn't his own loneliness, it was the way this young girl stood there, as though she didn't believe she deserved to take up space. Ryan noticed her before she spoke. He noticed the threadbare sweater, the backpack that looked far too empty, the way she hugged herself against the cold. But most of all, he noticed her eyes, soft, pleading, and filled with a quiet ache that reminded him far too much of Jacob after his mom died. And when Mara finally whispered that heartbreaking confession, he felt something inside him shift. Mara hadn't meant to talk to him. She had simply paused near the cafe to warm her hands by its outdoor heater, and when Ryan looked up and offered a small nod of acknowledgement, she froze. That tiny gesture, so simple, so ordinary, felt like someone opening a door she had spent her whole life knocking on. She whispered her truth, not expecting anything in return. She had learned long ago that people didn't stay, didn't care, didn't want to be bothered with broken souls. But Ryan didn't look away. He didn't pretend not to hear her. Instead, he pushed his coffee aside, straightened his posture, and for a moment simply looked at her like she mattered. Mara felt the weight of being seen crash into her chest. Something inside her cracked open, releasing years of silent pain she had tried to swallow. Her story spilled out slowly. She told him she aged out of foster care months earlier and had been sleeping in shelters and on buses. She said she tried to find work, but without family, support, or confidence, every attempt ended with her giving up before she even stepped inside the door. She confessed she felt cursed with invisibility, like the world had decided she wasn't worth speaking to, worth helping, or worth loving. Ryan listened with the kind of patience only a father could have. He didn't pity her, he empathized. He understood what it meant to lose everything. He knew what it was like to wake up to an empty space where someone should have been. And in Mara's trembling voice, he heard echoes of a struggle he thought only grief could create. When Jacob arrived minutes later, bouncing excitedly toward his dad, he noticed Mara instantly. Instead of shying away like kids sometimes do with strangers, he smiled at her with the warmth only a child could offer. He asked if she wanted to sit with them, and Ryan gently nodded toward the empty chair. Mara hesitated, terrified of being a burden, but when Jacob insisted, she finally sat down. She didn't know it yet, but that small act, sitting with them, would be the moment everything started to change. Ryan bought her a hot chocolate without asking if she wanted one, because he could tell she hadn't had anything warm all day. Mara wrapped her hands around the cup like it was a lifeline, feeling the heat seep into her bones. As they talked, Ryan realized how intelligent she was, how thoughtful her perspective on life was, how much potential she had buried beneath years of hurt. He told her gently, yet firmly, that people not talking to her didn't mean she was unworthy. It meant they didn't know her story, her strength, or her heart. He told her kindness wasn't given by the world but grown by those who had endured pain and still chose goodness. He told her she wasn't invisible, not to him, not to Jacob, and not to God. Mara broke down. Years of silent suffering spilled out as tears streamed down her face. She cried not just from sadness, but from finally feeling like someone truly saw her. Ryan offered her something she hadn't expected: help. Real help. A warm meal, contacts for a shelter that partnered with his workplace, someone to vouch for her so she could finally apply for a job without fear of being rejected for her past. He told her she could stop by the cafe anytime he and Jacob were there so she would never again feel like she had no one to talk to. It wasn't a grand rescue. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was simply kindness, pure, human, powerful kindness. And sometimes, that's all a broken life needs to begin mending. Weeks later, Mara had a part-time job, a safe place to sleep, and a newfound confidence she never knew she could have. She wasn't fixed, not completely, but she wasn't alone anymore. Ryan and Jacob had become her small piece of family, and every time she remembered that cold evening in Chicago, she whispered prayers of gratitude for the moment a stranger looked up and decided she mattered. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your engagement helps more people discover uplifting stories like this one. Before you go, please comment below. Kindness can change a life.